Hello there, I'm Catherine Curry-Williams.
And I'm Robin Radin.
And this is Wine, Women, and Chocolate. And we're here today to talk about, you guessed it, wine, women, and chocolate. But one of our guests is an amazing woman and friend. She is the queen of the Central Coast and the first Black woman in our country to open up her own vineyard. And here she is. She's a glass ceiling breaker and extraordinarily entrepreneur. There's not even a word. She is the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. She is a beautiful spirit, and she is my friend. And Iris Rideau, welcome.
Thank you, Kat, for the beautiful words. That was so nice. My goodness. It's
raining here today.
It's raining, and it's a good sign.
And we're
like
here.
We're having a wedding or something. Like this is a good sign,
we're
right?
Here at your vineyard, the vineyard in your name.
Thank you. Yeah, I created this 25 years ago. Actually, I bought the property in 95, and it took me 2 years to restore the old house. And I loved every moment of it.
Let's start the podcast with cheers to that. A toast to all that's good, the rain, the beautiful vineyard, where we are. And we want to take it very back to the very beginning of Iris Rideau.
Thank you so much. And I will take you back there. We go all the way back to New Orleans.
We should tell, first of all, our listeners that, you've had an amazing life, but also that they can watch this or listen to it, right?
Oh, yeah. That's right. You could see us, and you could see this rain behind us.
Yeah.
Or you could just listen and hear maybe the pitter-patter.
Yes, it's winewomenandchocolate.com or anywhere. You can listen anywhere podcasts are available. You can watch it on your website or at youtube.com/winewomenandchocolate. And yes, Iris, we want to start back at the beginning with where you grew up as a child.
Well, first of all, I want to commend both of you for this wonderful, amazing project that we're all on, and the fact that the name is Wine, Women, and Chocolate. Here I am. So anyway, I go all the way back to 1940s. I was actually born in 1936, but 1940s.
Don't do the math, anyone. Don't do that.
Thank you very much.
Do that.
Actually, I don't care anymore. I've gotten so old, it doesn't matter.
You are an
amazing woman.
Thank you. So, I think what motivated me more than anything was the fact that I was being oppressed every single day I stepped out of my house. Well, not every day. The days that I was out with my Black family. And I experienced all the injustices and suffering that Black people suffered in the South. And when I went out with the white side of my family, I was white. And as a matter of fact, I have a grandmother, Mère, mother in French, who passed for white. And that's what we did as Creoles in order to save ourselves as human beings. We passed because we knew the advantages of not being oppressed. And the oppression goes so deep, you can't even imagine as a child being told, well, first of all, being called by the N-word, then being told that you have to step off the sidewalk when they're coming by. We couldn't even look up at them. They didn't even want our eyes on their bodies.
Let me ask you, because back in the 1940s, was it common for someone who was Black to have a Black and white side of a family?
In New Orleans, yes.
Okay.
Very much so, because we were Creoles, and we had our own culture. So we would say that we weren't accepted by Blacks or whites. In reality, we were not accepted by whites, but we didn't accept the Black people either. Only because we didn't want to have to face the injustices, like I said, that they were going through. So there was so much separation. And see, that's what's so terrible about what's happening today in this country, is the division that is pitting us against each other. And for me, it was important for us to mix with everybody. I grew up with, my family had a bar and grill. called Little Ferd's Place. It was in the Creole section of town, and my mother ran it, and as a single mom, and I would come home from school for lunch and sit at the bar and have my grilled cheese sandwich. And people would ask me in the tasting room, when did you first start drinking wine? And I would say, it's 7 years old.
Wow.
But that was because my grandmother, Mare, that I speak of all the time, she was half Italian and half black. And so she would have a pitcher of red wine on Sundays at the kitchen table for the family, and the children got a chance to have their own little glass of wine. So when we'd see these little glasses come out, we'd go, yay, we're going to have some wine.
Yeah.
So I kind of developed a palate for drinking wine and enjoying wine. And so that was kind of a natural transition.
That'd keep away the terrible twos from your kids.
That's probably why they gave it to us, you know?
Well, Italy, we know that. You can drink pretty much wine. They don't consider alcohol.
Right, and France too. I mean, the thing is, I think that when you grow up that way, it's part of your culture. Mm-hmm. You don't become an alcoholic because you're raised that way. Right. I mean, it's just an accepted thing. It's moderation, mm-hmm. which is always the key. But so all of those things I was taught as a child. Going forward, at the age of 10, I wanted to visit my father in California. And my grandmother, Mare, took me on the train to California to visit my father at 10 years old. And we passed as white on the train. Mm. And I remember to this day all the privileges we had and how beautiful everything was, and we'd go to the dining room and there's white tablecloths and flowers at the end of the table sitting in a bud vase. It's like those memories just stick with you. And the reason why it's so important to me is because my grandmother stayed in California, and I had to go back to New Orleans at the end of the summer. And I had to go, I traveled with my mother's girlfriend, who was black, and we had to go and sit in the Negro dining car. Mm-hmm. Not dining car.
Dining the car itself, right?
Sorry. Negro Car, mm-hmm. what it was called. And so I was in shock. I mean, there was no dining room. There was nothing to eat. You had to bring your own food. And it was dark. It was dingy. It was dirty. And people were suffering from it. The seats were hard. And so
it was like a complete different train. Like you wouldn't be in
exactly.
You couldn't believe
As a matter of fact, that's a good point. I asked the girl, I said, where's the dining car? I want something to eat. And she said, honey, there is no dining car on this train. And I thank her to this day for saying that, instead of saying to me, we can't go to the dining car because we're black. So it left a feeling of needing to change, not just my own life, but the people around me.
Yeah.
And so went back to New Orleans and witnessed the same kind of persecution, suffering, and oppression.
Were you aware at such a young age that this was because you were black?
Oh, yeah. They made it very clear, they meaning white people, mm-hmm. Made it very clear that we were subservient. Mm. And, you have to ask yourself the question today. Why? Why is this? And we're still going through it.
Yeah.
Today, Dr. King's birthday, and he went through all of this, and we didn't get the voting rights until 1965.
It's
and now we're starting all over again.
It is. It's unthinkable for...
All over again.
Yeah.
All over again.
That we're trying to pass this Voting Rights Act.
Tomorrow.
And we can't get it through.
It's unconscionable, and I know that... there's a minority that is a strong force of a minority that's even having this be a question, and the majority of us and everyone is all for. We are all the same. Our journeys are different, but we know that they shouldn't have been. I mean,
Exactly.
So Iris, you finally came out to Los Angeles?
I finally came out to Los Angeles. I convinced my mother at 11 to move to California, and we did. And
You got some kind of strong will to be 11 years old and convince your mother
exactly
to move across the country.
My mother would say to her friends, she's been making decisions for us since she was 10 years old. And I did.
Now, California
I did.
versus New York. New York, I grew up in New York, and in Brooklyn, I had friends of all colors. It was less. I didn't understand racism until I was a little older, and I saw it actually when I moved to California. Because in New York, we lived on the same block in the same building. I did go to school in the 60s. I'm trying to think, when did I go to school? But you jumped all the way to California, which I think is just, it's not a city, so it's more rural, so you see more separation than I did in the city.
Well, we moved to Los Angeles, and so as a Creole heritage and community, we found our own neighborhood. And the butchers came, the bakers came, the hairstylists came. And so we did, this was on Jefferson and the avenues, they called it, from Crenshaw, between Crenshaw and La Brea.
Yeah.
For those of us that know Los Angeles, okay? So we had our own community, like most ethnic groups of people. When you move to a different city or state,
right,
like you're mentioning that, you find your own.
Find your people.
So that's basically what we did. But so that we're not stuck on this subject way too long.
Oh man, no, it's a subject worth, especially we're airing this episode in, it's Martin Luther King's birthday when we're shooting it, and this is Black History Month.
Right,
and,
exactly.
When it airs, so it's important. The subject, there's never enough time to talk about the injustice, I feel. But yes, we do want to, you've broke so many glass ceilings that, of course, we will need you here for 3 years to talk about it. But how
in Los Angeles, though, so you came here, and then was it different here than it was in New Orleans in terms of how you were treated? I mean, it was a much more progressive city even in the 50s.
Right. Good question, because there's still prejudice. I mean, we live in a country where we were founded on slavery, basically. And so we can't remove ourselves from it no matter what.
Right.
I shouldn't say no matter what. Let's hope that we can. But growing up in California, I experienced a lot of personal problems, sexually abused as a child, dropping out of school, getting pregnant at 15, having my baby at 16, getting a divorce at 17, and becoming a single mom, like my mom. And with no education, she put me in to work in a sewing factory where she was. That was the turning point. That's answering your question.
Yeah.
That was the turning point in my life. I looked at my life and I said, I can't stay here. I cannot walk into, it was in those days, there were sweatshops. So women would line up outside the door, file into the factory, and go down the aisle and sit down at the sewing machine and sew all day. And I looked at that and I was in shock. I was actually physically in shock. I went, this is not my life. So I enrolled in night school, junior college, and I completed my the first semester, and I went out looking for a job immediately. I experienced the prejudice then. I was actually passing for white again because there were no front office jobs for blacks in the 50s. This was 56, 57. And, they said to me when I finished my courses at the Trade Tech, they said, you need to go to work for the telephone company. And it was because I had already disclosed the fact that I was black to a student in the classroom that accepted me as white and talked about black people. And I got to the point one day where I finally said to her, I'm black. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So she went directly to the instructor, and I was not given a job opportunity.
How did it turn out that you did get a job? What did you do to go get it?
Well, when I went to the office, the job placement office at the school, the first thing the woman said to me was, you need to go to work for the telephone company.
And now that at that time, so was that not considered a college educated
Well, to me, you know
job?
what that looked like in my mind was the same as the factory.
Okay.
It looked the same as women lining up with these on their ears, talking to a switchboard, and
Right.
all day
That's
long. Yeah, and you remember the woman,
That's
the
a
manager,
switchboard operator.
that was on roller skates, going back and
Yeah.
forth from each operator to the other. That's what it mentally looked like to me. So I got up out of that office and ran out before I started to cry. And on the way home, I picked up the LA Times that very day. Picked up the LA Times, went home, pulled out the classified ads, and began to call everybody to find my own job. And I said, I'm going to find what I want. And I would go on interviews. And finally, I landed this wonderful opportunity working for an insurance agency. And it was Jewish-owned, family, wonderful. And I learned so much from them. They were very warm, very accepting.
And they knew you were black?
I don't know to this day.
They never asked.
They never asked, and I never told. Because I didn't
Because
know
it
where
didn't
I was.
matter.
Right, because it didn't matter.
Well, it
so
did
that was
matter
clear.
in a sense in the 50s still, because the jobs were not there for black people.
But they didn't care.
But they didn't care.
You were
And
qualified.
so
That's
I
what they
was
cared
qualified, and I typed 90 words a minute on a Royal typewriter.
Impressive.
So I'm sure that kept my job for me. But that was what launched my career, strange as it may seem. I mean, it was like, I always
about.
say,
Insurance, because you had no preconception of what that was, although that was...
exactly. I hadn't taken insurance courses. I had
Right.
taken business courses. And so I had to learn insurance, but I went back to school at UCLA, night classes, and I studied any kind of insurance class that was available to me.
It didn't hurt that you were incredibly bright. I mean,
Well,
this
you
was
know what? One of the things that helped me a lot was the fact that I loved legal papers. I loved reading the exclusions and the insuring agreements in policies, which was very strange.
Yes.
So, as
But now I know why you needed wine in the end.
well, because most women think they can't read insurance papers, or their husband needs to be in charge of that, and that's not a fact. I mean, that's not a reality. We can learn anything we want to learn.
So you just powered through that and jumped up in that company because the next step is, again, another glass ceiling
Yes,
that hadn't ever happened. So go right there.
So what was going on there? I was reading everything that they had in front of me. I was typing all the insurance policies, so that was number one, and they were all lined up and
So
coming.
that job was an education in itself.
In itself.
Wow.
And then going back to school, learning insurance classes, taking insurance classes. I started off with property and casualty, and I realized, no, actually I started with homeowners policies, and I loved the legal agreements in the policy. And I went, oh my gosh, maybe this is for me, like that. And then I started taking commercial classes, and I learned everything that I could while working for the insurance agency. And then finally, I stepped away from that. I got married, and
You did all this. Wait, I have to
in the
get
50s.
my mind going. But also, you had
We're still in the 50s?
We're still in the 50s.
And you
Oh my
had a
goodness.
child on top of it before you got married.
Right,
So that,
right.
and you went to school and got the job. It's okay. I just had to take a
Well,
moment.
my mother
and
helped
pause
me a
here
lot.
for
I
this.
was living with her, and so she would pick up my daughter from babysitting, and it was just babysitting. There was no childcare
Right.
at that time, and so anyway, she would pick up my daughter while I went to school at night.
Okay.
And
then
then I did it. I mean, and then I stepped off and I said, you know what, I can start my own insurance agency. I want to be totally independent of my husband. I want to do it all myself.
Wow. Well,
I really did.
That was not a common, thought that women had back then. It just wasn't, not that women couldn't do it, but it wasn't a common idea that they would or that they wanted to.
Right.
no. And the fact that we just heard the baby in the background. By the way, we're at the vineyard here.
Yes.
And that's why we're hearing all these wonderful
Yes.
clinking of glasses and
Right,
so on.
right.
That will be in episode 2. You'll have to know more about the vineyard. But I'm hearing babies cry
know.
on cue when she said, and I had the baby in childcare. So I want to acknowledge
That's
what's
great.
in the
That's
room.
great. The baby's in the room, right?
So now you're all to where you're starting your own business.
Yes.
Oh my.
Did you need a bank to loan you the money, or had you been saving?
That is such a good question. You're a sharp
the
girl.
Robin brings it. She brings it.
Well, I tell you what happened. I started working out of my home, out of one of the back rooms. We had a little family room kind of set up in the back, and I turned it into an office. So I started working from my home initially. And the reason why I did was my husband and I were in real estate at the time, and we had started investing in commercial property, actually apartment buildings. And the Watts Riots broke out. Now, we're in the 60s. And the properties that we had were not in Watts, but they were in the curfew zone, which means when the government sent in the National Guard, they set up boundaries.
Right.
And the boundaries became redlining. And the people that lived in those communities could not get insurance on their properties, nor could they get loans.
Yeah.
So my husband asked me if I would, since I had this insurance background, you want to start an agency? And I said, yes, but it's going to be mine from day one. I said, it's not going to be in Rideau and Shies, which is the name of the company. I want to start my own agency. So I did.
And you got insurance for those people who couldn't.
And I got insurance for the people that could not.
Wow.
And that's really what launched my career, because there were thousands of people that were living residential areas that were not touched at all by the riots. As you know, most of the riots break out in commercial areas. It has nothing to do with the communities.
And they were redlined, as you said, just because
Yes.
everybody was lumped in, and it was
Everybody
injustice.
it was again a setback.
Yeah, and
another setback.
You were not a woman
to stay
taking-
still and no, let that happen. So I started, and not only that, I was able to provide insurance for escrow companies that we did business with, escrow companies that needed insurance to close their files in order to fund,
Right.
to fund the house.
The house.
The people couldn't move forward without
Exactly.
it, really. You can't buy a house.
So I got Hartford Insurance Company to be my first appointment. So I was the first woman of color to be appointed to the Hartford Insurance Company.
Wow.
And then from there, they gained more confidence in me and my ability to underwrite and rate policies. And so I was just reading this morning, along comes LBJ's War on Poverty program. Now, Lyndon Johnson appointed Dr. King in 1965. He appointed, he passed the Voting Rights Act, I should say, in 1965.
Right.
And here we are talking about it, and Lyndon Johnson passed a War on Poverty program, and it was a grant for every major city in the country to raise the social consciousness and abilities to function in the Black and Mexican communities. So it was Black and Brown communities that received these grants, and the grant was for childcare, on-the-job training, health programs, any number of things. Teen Post was one of my favorite things. It took the kids off the street.
Wow.
If we had had that program today, we would not have communities like we have that that's filled with violence and guns and all of this, because I saw those kids coming off the streets and going into the centers where there were adults there.
And there was
monitoring
constructive,
them.
productive,
Yeah,
fun
there was reading
outlets.
classes,
Right.
there was everything for them to help them to get a better job, have opportunities and education and all of that. And no guns. There were absolutely no guns at the time. Now we do.
Right.
Anyway, that program only lasted 5 years. And then it was Nixon's administration that destroyed the program, canceled all the funding for it.
It's that roller coaster of, so that will take us into politics, because you...
So then, yeah, exactly. There were no commercial businesses, black-owned businesses at the time. There was probably 7 or 8. So there was no opportunity for me to go beyond homeowners policies and auto policies. And I needed to go forward. And I needed to go into commercial insurance. So I went back to school, back to UCLA, took up commercial classes.
And how old were you now? Approximately?
Now I'm 29.
God, that's it? I thought you were going to say, now I'm 40. No, you're only 29. It's amazing.
I started my agency when I was 29. Well, I'll say maybe I was 32, 33.
Okay. Still?
I'm still
all in the
young,
same
right?
vein of... Oh,
So we're still at 1966, 1967.
Exactly. That's
All
right.
right.
So anyway, moving on. So that really launched my career. And so I went into politics because it was the only opportunity that I had to insure commercial properties, businesses. So I began by insuring the NAACP, Urban League, Drew Medical School that has over 9,000 employees now. We started at the same time. Watts Health Foundation, all of those major corporations that were providing services to the community. I insured them. I insured malpractice insurance. Anything that they needed, I insured.
wow.
And then, as I mentioned, the Watts Riots came, and then I knew that we had to step beyond that. And so I worked with the mayor, giving back, because that contract was very significant. It was a $50 million contract that was awarded to the city through Lyndon Johnson's program, War on Poverty. And they didn't think about the insurance for the program. No one had insurance specifications. So I go to City Hall to pick up the binders on the agencies, and there's 40 agencies in the program, none of which have insurance. And so I had to write the insurance specifications even to get the bid. I won the bid, and from there I said to the mayor, whatever you need me to do at City Hall, we'll do. So he said, we need affirmative action program. I want to start an affirmative action. That was the first affirmative action program for minorities and women in Los Angeles. And now this is 1970. I mean, we're still way back there. And so we formed a board, the mayor did. I sat on the board and chaired it for 4 years, sat on the board for 10, 12 years, I don't remember. Anyway, we did a lot for women and minorities to be awarded contracts with the city of LA.
Woman breaking the ceiling on so many levels. And, well, so apparently that bored you after a while.
It did, because then I started my next company.
Okay, so you thought, I'm going to retire from this, or that word never entered your mind?
Never entered my, I was just getting started.
No, yeah.
I'm
going to pivot, change the game, whatever we call all that stuff now. And what was next after that?
Next after that was the securities firm. So I founded a securities firm specializing in pension planning for public employees.
Wow.
And that's where I started. I opened a second office. I had 50 employees. I was granted that contract again, first Black woman to own a securities firm on the West Coast. And as I said, we specialized. So my job, I became a California State Director, National Director of a national program.
So you're running both companies simultaneously?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it's really unbelievable.
Robin and I are feeling a little, no, not to feel, not to feel a little, my goodness. And we were just talking about wine, and I'm like,
Yeah.
This wine is just kind of the very beginning of the next chapter.
oh my
which
goodness.
we'll cover.
But
anyway,
are you
going
close
back to my
getting to the vineyard?
Well, the securities firm I had for another 15 years. And my job was to enroll the city employees into what was called a deferred compensation plan, a 457 plan. That's kind of like a 401k plan, but designed especially for public employees.
Oh.
So I landed the contract with the city of LA, which was like
Big deal.
big
Incredible.
deal.
It's amazing. I know you, I know this, and every time I hear it, I always get
a little bit more.
amazing details, and it blows my mind.
And all this time now, your mother and your daughter, were they just blown away by everything you were doing, or were they just like, this is just Iris doing Iris?
My mother was like that, Iris doing Iris,
Wow.
because I just wanted to do so much more than she did. And so she was satisfied with what she had. I was never satisfied. I was never, and I still am not. I'm still.
Do you know where that drive comes from?
Came from that factory.
Well,
I mean, it came from the factory, seeing myself stuck for the rest of my life with no education, no opportunity to go beyond sewing a pocket on or a sleeve on or setting a zipper. I don't think so.
yeah.
But now here you are, you're running two businesses, right?
Yes.
You've broken every glass ceiling that's come before you, and yet you still, you're certainly at this point in your life not going to end up in a factory.
No, that's right. No.
And you still have the drive.
I still have the drive. And I think that initially it came from the way I was raised in New Orleans. I think seeing the difference between the privileged and the advantaged, and the privileged and disadvantaged, I should say.
And especially when it was for no reason.
Right.
No reason.
Right.
Absolutely none, And so I did that for another 15 years. And in 89, now that was 20-some years running my two companies in Los Angeles, being very political. But I loved the life. I mean, I was very social.
Well,
I had the big fundraisers, the St. John dresses, and back in the day.
So it was all part. Glamour was fun too.
It was glamour.
Well, because was there fun? I'm glad you bring that up, because all of that, in my eyes, seems it's very, very serious. That you mentioned legal documents that you love. I'm like, well, where was that? I don't know that, Iris.
Yeah.
So, that after the legal documents and everything, and fun was to be had there as
It
well.
was
So that
fun.
was.
It was giving back. It was fun. It was a lifestyle, and I loved it. And I love the fact that I was helping so many women and minorities. That's what we were called back in the day.
So what year did you hop into your car and drive to Santa Ynez?
Good question.
Well, we
Okay.
want to get to that. We want to get to all of that, but our time for this episode has sadly come to a close.
Oh, how's
All
that?
right,
Really?
Yes.
Oh, we're gonna get to taste and talk about getting in the car and driving back and
Yes.
forth to Santa Ynez.
Okay.
While you still have your business?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I still have my business. Yes.
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 Wow. Okay. Well,
right.
how do
Cheers.
we? Oh my God! How do we wrap up this episode? This is not an easy one. Iris, you are a I can't say
force.
that on a force to be reckoned
Oh,
with.
thank
a
you.
Force to,
How about a pioneer?
a pioneer?
And a
Love
pioneer.
That's all.
And I'll say it, and I know we're on the air. I call it an FW. You can edit this if you want, but you're a fucking wonder. Here's to that.
Cheers.
Thank you, darling.
Cheers.
I like that. I love the word anyway.
Okay.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
1016 Entertainment.